Everyone. We have apologies from Councillor Dennis Harvey, who's chair of this panel, and as Vice Chair, I'm chairing this meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Do we have any other apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Gillian Roach. Peter Mawson and Dave Parsons is substituting for him today. Councillor June Tandy and Richard Chataway will be substituting for her today. And Councillor Jenny Fradgley.
Okay, thank you very much. Disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Are there any disclosures?
Chair, I'd like to declare an interest in the annual report. There is a reference in there to the legal services being provided to the Commissioner, and as manager of that service within the County Council, that's an interest to me.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on 20th of June. Are there, first of all, any corrections to those minutes? Anything on page 1 and 2? Page 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, 8 and 9, 10. Okay. There are a couple of typos that I've picked up that I'll give to the clerk. Are there any matters arising that aren't elsewhere on the agenda? Anything on page 1, 2, Derek, 3, 4,
Chair,
5.
under item 6, there was a question about the terms of reference.
Yes.
And the second paragraph of item 6. My advice to the panel is that the terms of reference remain as currently drafted. They entirely accord with the legislation, and they should remain as is.
Okay. All happy with that? Thank you very much. Anything else on page 4, 5, 6, 7? Yes, Derek.
Chairman, page 7, paragraph 2, cyber crime, and the toolkit sent out by the Commissioner's office. I mentioned the toolkit in the panel meeting, and I was surprised that the members didn't know there was a toolkit being sent out to the CSPs. I've obviously seen that as my CSP manager sent me the details. I couldn't make head or tail of it. In fact, we sent it to Birmingham University, where it was viewed by an academic, way beyond anything that a layperson can understand. Can we have a different version that we can understand?
Okay. Can we pick that up? I mean, I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask the Commissioner to comment on that at this point. Yeah, would you like to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly where you're coming from. What we need to do, the work that we need to do in terms of cyber, needs to be of use to the general public. So if we're using language and terminology that we don't understand, it's very unlikely that the public will. So in terms of the work that we will be doing with cyber will be in the prevention area, and that will be aimed at the general public. So your comments are very well made and taken on board.
Just supplementary to that, why did you send it out if you couldn't understand it?
I'm not sure I can answer that question at this stage. So, but
can I just remind you and me, we need to be repeating the question.
Repeat the question, indeed. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So that'll be followed up in due course. Anything else on page 7? Page 8, 9, and 10. Okay. Let's move on then to the main item on the agenda. Sorry, there's public question time. Are there any public questions?
No, there aren't.
No public questions. Okay. I think that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Can we do a little more in terms of advertising the availability of the opportunity?
Yeah, we will do.
Okay.
Chair, if I may say, I'm still concerned with the communication to our public. I guess most people wouldn't know this is happening. I don't know how it's
No. I mean,
clear that the public communication about such meetings, I think if they were, you probably would get a few more questions from the public, but there is still some concern on that, Chair.
okay, the point being made is that there isn't sufficient knowledge about these meetings, and I think we need to have a bit more publicity on that in some way. I mean, I know the Commissioner has other opportunities for public questions and so on, but I think it is appropriate that we do too. Okay, thank you very much. Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report. Over to you to introduce. Thank you.
What I'd like to do this morning, with the indulgence of the panel, is to go through very much in headline form what I feel that we've done over the last year that has made a difference, that can be identifiable as things where we have had an influence in terms of the role that I have. So I'm going to relatively quickly go through that in headline terms and then just leave as long as possible for questions. So I've split this up into various sections. So let me start with the policing part of my role. And really significant in everything we do on the policing front these days is bound up inextricably with the Alliance. And just about the first thing I said on being elected was that I was not only a supporter but an advocate for the Alliance, and everything that we've done over the last year has been to strengthen and deepen the work that's done with our West Mercia colleagues. And so that has figured very prominently over the last year. We commissioned a report from the Police Foundation to have a look at the Alliance and how it's performing, and to offer some suggestions for the future. We've just had that report. It is in draft form only at the moment, but I can say that it has made some really very positive comments about the Alliance. A significant factor, and this applies across the country, is the relationship between the Commissioner and Chief Constable. And I'm happy to be able to report that we have an excellent working relationship. I think, to be fair, that's down to both of us. We both recognise what our roles are and what our roles are not. We operate very much on the same page. And so that relationship is going extremely well. That can't be said everywhere all over the country. So we're fortunate there. In terms of force performance, it is incredibly good. Still, reductions in traditional crime measures are going down. It depends on the time period that you look at, but we're looking at reductions of sort of 9%, 12%, as I say, depends on the time period that you look at. But in terms of traditional crime, that picture is very good and very healthy. Where it isn't is in fraud and cybercrime, but I'll come on to that. We've had a number of HMRC reports over the last year. There was one that came out on domestic abuse. The headline response to that report across the country was that there's a significant problem in the way domestic abuse is handled, and particularly amongst police forces. If you actually read into the report proper, Warwickshire are singled out of one of 8 forces across the country that actually that does not apply to, that the citizens of Warwickshire can have confidence that domestic abuse will be well handled. There's a value for money report coming out on Tuesday of next week, I think. Bizarrely, the force are sent a copy of that report. I don't get it, but I have been led to believe that we are actually going to get a very, very good report. And it's frustrating that I'm not here this morning being able to give you the detail of that. But that should be good. When I took over this role, Warwickshire was an independent force with its own Chief Constable. That is my intention when I eventually leave this job, whenever that may be. Warwickshire will be independent with its own Chief Constable. In terms of officer numbers, again, across the country there are some horror stories. we're in the fortunate position in Warwickshire, and the Alliance helps very much with this, I inherited approximately 800 full-time officers. Not only is that number not going to reduce, together with our Alliance partners, we've brought recruiting forward so that as retirements happen, that number will not reduce. So we're not getting any reduction in full-time officer numbers. Number of PCSOs has been, the floor is 100. It will not go below 100. I'm investing £2 million in PCSOs. And we're recruiting special constables as fast as we can get them. What's not helped the overall picture is there are a number of specials, for obvious reasons, were part of the recruitment into the full-time numbers. But anyway, we are keeping that tap as open as we can get it. Just one thing on the operational side, Operation Devonport, which is the proactive element of policing, which Andy Parker is very keen on. I am convinced that it is being effective. If you look at our performance compared to that of West Mercia, it's money we're investing, they are not, and there is differential performance being achieved by that. So there's a report on that being commissioned. We're just having a look at that now, but I am at the moment minded to help continue supporting that. That's good. On quickly to the and crime bit of my job. I had just under £1 million in community safety funding. We had £1.8 million worth of bids for that funding. The excellent staff I now have in Northgate Street did a very thorough job of going through those bids. Very professional job. We've been able, by creative use of other funds, to allocate something just short of £1.2 million funding there. We have very good community safety partnerships in Warwickshire, and part of that has meant that I've been able to significantly increase funding to the community safety partnerships, including the one here in Rugby. Across the Alliance, we are spending £1.5 million per year now on rural crime, business crime and cyber crime. Those are three areas that have been flagged up, and we're just in the process of being more specific about how that money is going to be spent. I inherited good working relationships with our partners, and I'm happy to say that that's being continued. The good performance I referred to earlier is not entirely down to the police, as Andy Parker never ceases to remind people. We have really good working relationships, and I'm happy to say that they are continuing. In terms of governance, we've restructured the governance for the Alliance. We now have a body called the Alliance Governance Group, which has both commissioners and deputies, and both chief constables and deputies on, and that is the overarching body that now is running the Alliance. As far as relationships with yourselves, the Police and Crime Panel, I think it's fair to say that it wasn't clear, our roles weren't clear, and I think that probably manifested itself earlier on. It feels from my position as though we are working better together now. I hope that's replicated. We have an audit committee now overseeing the Alliance, and I'm just about to start recruiting for an ethics committee, again, for the Alliance. In terms of public engagement, we are the only areas in the country using the Community Safety Ambassador Scheme. That's running well. We have had some hiccups with it. It could be better, and we're working on that. But so far, I would describe that as a success so far. I've been having meetings in public with the Chief Constable, latterly webcast. Again, we are the only force in the country that is doing that, where I hold the Chief Constable to account with the public presence. That's not a public meeting, although We've now modified it so there's a bit of a public meeting beforehand. So that's meeting 1, and we then go into meeting 2, which is where the public do not take part, and that's them just observing me holding the Chief Constable to account. As far as the Nuneaton and Bedworth and Stratford oversight and scrutiny committees are concerned, we've had meetings with them, really positive and constructive meetings with them, and that's something I'm more than happy to continue doing. I think that's been really, really helpful. One area where we've not done well enough yet is with press and media. That's not really worked that well. It goes against the grain a bit to me to be spending money on those areas, but I think it's important and I think we need to do it, and so we need to do that better. Moving swiftly on to finances, I inherited a strong financial position. That is still the case. The decision I took over this year was to do with the police precept. When you look at the storm clouds that are ahead of us in terms of cuts in budgets, I'm absolutely comfortable with that decision. Not only are we have not yet finished taking the funding out from the last comprehensive spending review. The Alliance has got another £30 million worth of cuts to be made by 2018. So I think that I'm absolutely comfortable with that decision. Very quickly, as commissioners, we have to do things on the national stage. This week, I've just been re-elected as the lead of the independent group of commissioners. There are 12 independent commissioners across the country. I play an active part in the National Police Air Service, and we've just taken a big step forward there in getting the Met on board. That was a major obstacle, and again I was a member of the subcommittee that solved the problems that got the Met on board. And the Home Secretary is now running a group on domestic abuse. She chairs it, and I am one of 3 commissioners sitting on that body. Very quickly, it will sound, I would hate it to sound as though I'm sitting here complacent. The picture is going well. One of the major reasons why it is going so well is because of the support I get from a number of really significant individuals. I have to say Eric is a most tremendous support across the country. There have been issues over deputies. It's never been raised in Warwickshire because I think of Eric's reputation. So that's been really good, and as you know, I appointed Neil Hewison as Chief Executive over the last year, and I'm really pleased at the work that he's doing and the professionalism with which the office is now operating. So I'll sort of stop at that point. That's a very quick run through in headline form of what's happened over the last year, and as I think you know, you have to do a written response now for my annual report, so I look forward to hearing that. But right now, if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to face them.
Thank you. There are a number of questions. First of all, Councillor Chataway.
First of all, thanks for that light passage of your report. Lots of pages, lots of information on that. Just wondering, who is the actual report aimed at? Is it aimed at this body or is it aimed at the wider consumption?
The question is, who is the report aimed at? And it is relatively lengthy, and it's a dilemma because we need to provide sufficient information for you and people who are really interested, take a close interest in what we're doing, but it is also aimed as a document for the general public to read. So the executive summary, I think, is relatively short. So if we've got the balance of that wrong, let us know. But Okay, the question relates to output from meetings that I attend. There's a list within the report. There's a list of the meetings I attend, and we've not actually covered what the output from the meetings is. The outcome of the meetings, and I'm looking to Neil Hewison here, my chief executive. I mean. That of course lengthens the report, if anything. So.
The idea behind that was really to, because it is the first full report, was to give the panel and the wider public how broad and how committed Ron's been to linking as many different groups and accounts as possible. And this isn't a comprehensive list, it's a snapshot. It doesn't take into account lots of communication, for instance, via letter and email, and that's quite broad as well. That list was just to give a flavour of the kind of activity that Ron's been doing over the last 12 months. To come back to your point, Councillor, about the outcomes, it's a fair point, and I think what the report has tried to do is give some details of the outcomes as a result of those kind of meetings with the body of the report, rather than being specifically attached to that meeting and that attendance. A lot of the meetings that take place are at people's request. So we go, Ron goes away, it goes because people want to speak to the Commission and share their view. So the other side of that answer is, this is another example of how widely we consult to get the views of people in Warwickshire to ensure that we do the work that's required to improve policing service.
Yeah, I can see. We can see the dilemma here. I mean, it took me an hour and a half to read the report. I just can't see many members of the public spending an hour and a half reading it. So it's hard. It's long on activity and perhaps a bit short on outcomes. But I think that's the key point that's being made. And I think for the future, we would like to see more focus on outcomes and perhaps less on description of activity. Bob.
Thank you. Commissioner, I accept what your Chief Executive said a while ago in that your report clearly shows your commitment, it shows the wide range of organisations, agencies that you're working with and so on. But your key priority is to reduce crime, and central to that is the work of the police. Not your own responsibility, but I would suggest your biggest responsibility. On page 7, which is where you report on the police performance, you only give 3 statistics, which quite surprises me. I would have thought that you would have thought that the public would have wanted to know more detail about specific crimes. It's burglary up and down, robbery, etc., violent crime and so on. You mentioned a few headlines yourself earlier, 10% down here, 12%. I think it would be useful to know that. And not just what's going on in Warwickshire, but how does that compare with others? We might be celebrating a fall in crime here, but is it falling as fast as it is in Leicestershire, in West Mercia and Gloucestershire, for example?
Okay, so the question was in terms of the report of performance as to whether we shouldn't put more detail in terms of how we compare with other forces, for instance. So I think we'll just take that on board for the future report. We will include more detail in terms of force performance. Is that okay? I mean, I can provide the detail to the panel later if you want it.
Well, we had it for last year already.
Well, yeah.
It's from the public perspective.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's really it's about what's included in the report.
Okay.
We think there should be more focus on performance in relation to crime.
Okay.
Chair, it might be worth recollecting this is very much a draft report.
Yes. Yes, we recognise that.
And we want to pick up comments and can quite easily build in the information you have on the last panel.
I think that would be helpful.
It may be that some of the information that we get, go back to the previous points, maybe it might be an abridged version of what happens to
Okay.
the points of the public happens to next week.
Councillor Parsons, did you want to raise a question on this?
In fact, I was going to raise the question about the Community Grants Innovation Fund. Is that?
No, we'll come back to that. Okay. All right. Okay, Councillor Chatterway, you wanted to raise a question about, that's on page 7 on road traffic collisions.
You've noted that there's been a 25% increase in the number of people seriously injured in road traffic accidents, and it's a statistic that the overview and scrutiny
Okay, the question's to do with the increase in killed and seriously injured figures, which have gone up approximately 25%. As a keen cyclist myself, it is a fact that cyclists and motorcyclists are, in fact, overrepresented in those figures. What we have done is allocated some funds to one of the voluntary groups that is involved in training for motorcyclists, increasing training for motorcyclists. It is a concern with the broad spectrum of figures being so good in other areas. It's disappointing to see that particular figure go as it is. There doesn't appear to be a single theme to justify it, other than, and I think the increase in cyclist numbers is probably down to the fact that there's been a very large increase in the number of cyclists. I mean, since the Olympics and since Britain has suddenly become, well, until this year, a sort of major force in cycling. I mean, as I say, as a cyclist myself, I notice when I'm out and about there are just many, many more cyclists on the roads these days.
Can I come back?
Yes, sure.
Again, I appreciate the answers from Ron, but I think we have a growing problem in this policy. Now, I know that you are privy, or your officers are privy to police reports on when an accident happened and that happened investigation. I'm just wondering if there's anything in those police reports as a local authority we could learn from. And I know that confidential information, the majority of confident actually is trying to address this particular statistic. And I'm just wondering, and you'd expect me to say that, I wonder if the impact of street lighting or street lighting going on has had an impact on the number of road casualty accidents. A recent AA report seems to be suggesting that. I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that, and a little bit if that information could be shared with officers of County Council.
Yeah, in terms of...
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that was the question was to deal with sharing of the results of police reports into accidents, and specifically asking the question as to whether the council's policy of turning off street lights has had an impact on that. I have asked the Chief Constable the question if there are any themes over the increase in KSIs, so killed and seriously injured, that I should be aware of, that anything that we should be funding that could help with that. And the response I got was that there wasn't anything other than this as I say, the cyclists being overrepresented, and that probably being down to the increase in the number of cyclists. The report that we've had back from street lighting is a county council report, and the thrust of that report was that there is no significant although there are one or two areas across the county where there have been increases in specific areas of criminality. They're very small and are not statistically significant. So that's the information I have to date. That the turning off of street lights has not had any statistically significant effect on either criminality or road accidents.
Okay, but clearly something within Warwickshire, and I chair the committee what Commissioner gives report to Warwickshire County Council, and we won't go into the crime side of it because I'm particularly want to focus down on the road traffic side of it. Clearly, okay, there's been an increased number of cyclists, but clearly there has been a 25% increase in for us, which is a key KPI, which up to 2 years ago was
Can I hand over to Chief Executive Neil?
That's just the way forward, because I agree with you completely. Just to be clear, the number of fatalities are the lowest they've ever been, continue to be low. Serious injuries have increased. And the force's view is, albeit very high level, that it could be attached to an increase in pencil RTCs. So what I suggest we do, if it's okay with the panel, is we will, by the Chief Constable, ask two things really. Firstly, does he understand why it's gone up 25% over the last 12 months? And secondly, what is he and his team doing with partners to drive those figures down? Would that be acceptable?
Okay. You happy with that, Councillor Chataway? Councillor Philip Morris Jones, do you want to come back on the same issue?
No, Chairman, another question.
A different question.
Can I
Okay.
ask a question, yeah?
No, I'm coming to you. Don't worry. Okay. Thank you. Next was on page 7, at the bottom of the page, it says you're considering that the Home Secretary made it clear she still expects forces to have high performance, even though they want to move away from target setting, and you're developing a new performance framework. What's the timescale for that? 'Cause this is a vital piece of work, really.
Yes.
As to how you measure the performance of the police, and indeed how we measure your performance.
Yeah. Well, the Home Secretary has made absolutely clear, and I agree with the Home Secretary on this, that targets are not the way forward, that they lead to distortions in behaviour. So one of the decisions I took last year was that we were not going to set any targets for the force. What that does not mean is that I am not interested in and don't follow what's happening out there. And I see the Chief Constable on a weekly basis, and as a standing item at that meeting is the latest force performance. So if there is any variation, we use the red, amber, green system, and I'm just like a really bad journalist when it comes to that, in that all I'm really focusing on is mainly focusing on is the red bits. So, you know, what's gone worse than this time last week or last year. So the fact that there are no targets doesn't mean that I'm taking my eye off the performance ball at all. The panel have made clear, and I do get this message, is that you need to be satisfied that that is being looked at, and so we need to develop a way of allaying your fears on that and giving you confidence that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So in terms of a timescale, it needs to be done relatively quickly. So we have. I'm looking to Chief Executive here. What would be a sensible timescale to work to? What would you say?
A couple of points. Firstly, the force are heavily engaged in a process to determine how they are going to measure their own performance. Moving away from targets, as Ron said, and the Commissioner's Office definitely is involved in that work. Secondly, we have a subgroup meeting planned with this client towards the end of August.
Yeah.
The subgroups will come together and work with the office to begin to develop a full performance framework. How long that's going to take us, I don't know. It depends on the people's views, but I said at the last meeting that I think it's really important the panel feed into that and actually inform the process. I mean, the problem we've got with the plan, from my perspective, I've inherited it, is it is very much full statements. It doesn't lend itself very easily to a performance framework. So we're going to have to think that one through together. Because what I want to do is have a performance framework which I understand, and then I can gear all of our activity to deliver that on behalf of the panel. That's what I want to do. But I'm going to need your help, because it isn't quite straightforward as
No.
it sounds.
Okay. Thank you for that. There are a couple of questions on finance. Bob, first of all.
Yes, I wanted to ask particularly about resources at the front line. And it might be easier, Chair, if I could ask us two questions.
Yeah.
And on page 20, where you talk about Operation X, and you talk about priority policing.
Might look at yours.
You talk about 3 teams ceasing to exist. There were 3 teams in Operation X and 3 teams in priority policing areas. Priority policing areas is what I'm focused on, and my understanding is that those are the areas where you are most likely to be a victim of crime in Warwickshire. I also suspect those are the areas where you are least lobbied by the public at large for more resources because of the nature of those areas. Just the question is simply, are we continuing to prioritise those areas in terms of resourcing? Are they getting additional staff, additional other resources to combat those areas where there's the highest proportion of crime in the county?
Okay, the question was about Operation X, our proactive policing operation, and specifically about the priority areas where demand is higher, and the question was on the premise that we probably get less lobbying from those areas. So effectively, are we still prioritising those areas? And the answer to that is that we are. I know of no reduction in provision to those areas. The deployment is actually down to the Chief Constable, but obviously it's something I keep my eye on and something we have a conversation about. But this is, as I said on my quick run through, Operation X or Devonport, it goes under different names, is something that the Chief Constable is incredibly exercised about and very keen that we continue. Not unreasonably, what I've done is commissioned a report into it. We've seen sort of initial bits from the report, and it looks quite encouraging. But in terms of the priority areas, then my understanding at this point is that there will be no reduction in provision in those areas.
Bob, second question.
Again, on the subject of resources in the front line, page 8, you give the table on some of the plans for next year. And I was just a little surprised, if I'm reading correctly, that protective services, which I understand includes investigations, domestic violence, areas like that, is falling by over 6%. As enabling services, which I thought were the areas where the Alliance is looking for the majority of savings, is to increase by 5%. Am I reading that correctly?
Can I hand the question over? Let me repeat the question, and that's to do with the fact that in the table on table 8 shows protective services expenditure decreasing, but the expenditure on enabling services increasing. And just the questioner is looking for an explanation for that. So I'd like to hand over to Rob, the Deputy Treasurer, to take that one.
This is one of the cases where we've included a table to try and be quite helpful, a little like we did in the budget paper in February, to try and show the differences between last year and this year. But fundamentally, there's been a big change in how the plans was put together between 13 and 14, 14, 15.
Yeah.
13, 14 was quite it was a new finance process that was pushed together within IX 14, 15. There's been a lot more movement around. So to put a comparison between 2 years probably isn't quite as accurate as we'd like it to be. Going forward next year, it would be much more accurate. I don't know if there's anything which looks like has a name associated.
Two things really. One is obviously as has been said, but secondly, that period of time, actually we took a load of budgets that previously had been distributed across the other functions and moved them into enabling services to centralise them. We've got better control of them, things like fuel, things like electricity, etc., got moved into enabling services. So you will see an increase because despite the austerity measures, actually they are still budgets that have risen by inflation year on year. Second reason is because so the big proportion of those changes is just associated with that movement of budget teams. And the second issue is that enabling services took its cuts very early in the process. So factors, but the biggest one is actually just a realignment of the budgets themselves.
So if these two columns on page 8, they aren't really comparable, there's not much point in including them, is there? Would it not be better to put in something on what the budget was and what the outturn was? Because there's no information here on the outturn at all, which surprised me.
It's probably a fair point. I think that there's some elements that outturn included within the narrative around expenditure for the office expenditures and on-capital expenditure. But it's a fair point, Chair.
Okay.
There's nothing around the police outturn in there, so we'd be fine with checking.
Okay, thank you.
And just to re-emphasise the point, this is a draft report.
Yeah,
so
no, we understand that.
Yes, just for the public maybe.
We're grateful.
Yeah. Okay.
Michael, just follow up on that?
Operation X, where if those teams have been disbanded or moved, how do the priorities continue?
I'm never afraid to say well, that's an operational matter. Really, that's a question that the Chief Constable could answer better than I, and I think Neil, the Chief Executive, is probably in a better position than me to answer that too.
I've been in discussion with the Chief Superintendent, who's leading Devonport, in fact, meeting after this meeting, because I had some questions really in terms of the situation before the end of October last year, was the position that Mr. Moore was talking about, 3 teams. It was clear to me, and I can see it. I've got that. What's not clear to me now is what's happened since, because the new policing law had such a dramatic impact on the way the resources look across the two forces. Those teams exist. They're not there anymore. So what we're got to establish is we can see very clearly the performance is very strong again this year, very stronger than last year. And there is clear water between what and what's supposed to be before. So you can say, well, the Commission's paying that money, that's what it's buying. And what we don't know is that right? So what I'm going to try and provide to Ron, firstly, is some reassurance that money is delivering all the outcomes that it's doing before the end of October. And if it's not structured in the right same way, how is it structured and how is it delivering the crime reduction which we're currently experiencing, which is 12%, which is
Yeah.
so I think we're persuaded to support it, and but we're just seeking some clarity around why they're actually doing it to deliver it. And is the Commissioner then there to continue to support it? The Chief Constable is paying, but he thinks it's the reason why we continue to see a reduction.
So perhaps, Ron, you would report back to us on that in terms of what your findings are at your next normal report to us.
More than happy.
Okay.
Yeah, more than happy.
Thank you very much. There's one further question on finance, and then we're on to cyber, rural and business crime. It's a question from Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Referring to page 15 with the future safety plans and innovation, when I looked at this as a representative of the authority, I was somewhat horrified at the small amount of money that had actually been allocated to the authority. And my first question really is why is this the case?
Well, as I said on my run through, the way we handled this process was to invite bids from both statutory and voluntary bodies. The bids were all assessed against a set of criteria. They weren't just assessed by one person, they were assessed and then cross-checked by other members of staff, and then the proposed allocations were done on the strength of the bids and the evidence that they had that whatever was being looked at was likely to be effective, because it was very definitely outcome focused. What we then did was stood back and look at the overall picture, because if you do things, piece by piece by piece, you can end up with a distorted picture. And then what that exercise did was identified a couple of areas where I would have been uncomfortable. One of those was in terms of child sexual exploitation, where the bid was poor, but obviously the subject is important. So I've had the bidders in to re-get that bid done. And then the other one was in terms of hate crime, and there's some work being done by Birmingham University, and we're waiting for that to come, because again, it's another important area. But in terms of the allocation, I mean, that was the absolute rigid process that was applied to it. And so if that was the outcome, then that was the outcome. So I forgot to repeat the question. That's right.
But my point is really, yes, looking at the whole picture. If this were to continue, then we would have to into this application of the services. I know it has to be related to bids, and I know the quality of bids has to be kept. If the quality of those bids isn't good enough, then that's a concern for myself and my local councils. And we need to know that.
Yeah. Okay. Could I hand over to my deputy Eric Wood?
The report we're looking at covers the past year.
Yeah.
The actual grant delivered to North Warwickshire this now has gone up, and it's 29,160. And in addition to that, there's a further 28,500 going to North Warwickshire. So take those two figures, a quite dramatic increase in the money going into North Warwickshire, and actually into every other community safety partnership.
Good point.
Thank you.
This is a retrospective.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks. Yeah.
Councillor Chatterway, did you want to come back on that?
Just briefly on this, clearly when you're looking at the report that's from a year, again, what interests me is your evaluation criteria and how it can be perhaps more focused down. If you ask somebody to bid, if somebody who's bid for millions of pounds in the past, it's sort of been interested or whatever. I'm just wondering what you say to people who you're asking to bid. Do they have to bid against your priorities, or do they bid against the community's priorities? Do they dovetail with the county council's priorities from their particular framework? Does it dovetail in with the community safety partnership's priorities? Does it dovetail in with the local priorities? And then going back to that, clearly, if I can just go back to crime figures for 1 second, the latest batch of crime figures which I've seen clearly shows different spikes in crime across the county in different areas. Is that then the money saying being allocated on a need, perhaps not a need basis, on where the spikes are, or is it open? I mean, sometimes in a bidding process for any limited amount of money, you have to say no, you can't bid because this is our priority. I'm just wondering how the whole system works, so that when people do bid going into the future, they've got a clearer understanding of what they can bid against.
Okay. The question was about the bidding process and what bidding process we ran and which priorities determined the outcomes, whether it was my priorities or local priorities or responding to spikes, for instance. And the answer to that is that I try as far as I possibly can to align my priorities with local priorities, and that's what the community engagement is all about. So I would be disappointed if my priorities end up significantly different from local priorities. But I guess the bottom line is that it is my priorities. I mean, I stand on a programme, I produce a police and crime plan, and the way that this process was run was that the staff the way it was described to me was went through the police and crime plan line by line and then assessed bids according to how they were addressing the priorities in the police and crime plan, because that's the document that the police are going to be working to as well. That effectively, that's the Bible that they work to. And what the feedback I've had so far has been extremely positive from the people who, even some of the bidders who were not funded, have said that they felt that the process was open, transparent and fair. So that's very much the feedback I've had so far. The question referred to whether there are gaps between local priorities and my priorities and expenditure in different areas of the county. But resources other than my community safety fund are spent. For instance, Operation X, which targets on high priority areas, is disproportionately spent across the county. So the community safety money is not the only money that's spent.
Eric?
Try and help. Total bids, when you get next year's report, you'll find that the total number of bids this year was 1.8 million. From that, 1.2 million was allocated. And it would be fair to say, those who chair CSPs, I'm sure would echo this. The report in front of you, which is the draft, reflects a process of grant awarding that was, at that time, very mature. We were looking in effect to try and hold steady and retain people in employment. We moved on from that, and the grant process now is really in two parts. Every community safety partnership has to prepare a strategic assessment. Local people assessing their local priorities, and they bid against categories within that. So that's a clear, locality-driven grant process that we wear. Over and above that, community safety partnerships have looked at, with other voluntary groups in the area, the priorities set out in the police and crime plan, and have made additional bids to reflect the Commissioner's priorities. Those two come together to form the community grants given to a particular area. So if you take precisely the point Councillor Chatterley's raised about burglary, there's about £3,500 this year going into the NEPA around target development packs to try and prevent repeat burglary. So the answer is, in shorthand, it's a mix of both. There's subsidiarity in operation at a local level, but strategic implementation from the Commission's priorities.
Okay, thank you very much. And we now come to, from page 21 onwards, cyber, rural and business crime. I'll ask Councillor Philip Morris-Jones to start on business crime.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's pleasing to see the Commissioner's attention to business crime. Personally, I prefer the term crime against the business sector, and I think most people find that more meaningful. This, of course, includes industry, commerce, retailing and agriculture. And I was surprised at the last meeting when I studied the statistics to note that only 42 crimes were registered throughout the year right across the county. Many people, I feel, would consider this rather an unrealistic figure. And I'm just wondering how this can be. Is it that crimes are not being reported? Or is it possible that the police are doing what I believe they're allowed to do, which is to screen out certain crimes, reported crimes? I must ask them what categories might be screened out, and I was told those which are too difficult to solve. Anyway, what I'd like to know from the Commissioner is, can he give further attention to this very important aspect of crime and see if a more accurate figure can be produced. If the figure is accurate, I think many people will be delighted at that will happen.
Okay, the question is focusing on business crime, on the apparently really low numbers that are recorded in Warwickshire. I think it was 442 was the figure that was mentioned, and whether I am going to keep a focus on business crime or crime that affects businesses. There's been quite a focus over the last year across the country in terms of crime recording. My colleague in Kent did some work there where it appears that there were practices being used that led to under-recording of crime. There's been a real focus on this now, and the discretion that the police have in choosing what they record and what they don't is just being ever more tightly scrutinised and tightly controlled. So I'm confident that what's being recorded is, and certainly what was mentioned in the question, whether or not the police could choose not to record something because it would be too difficult to solve, I am confident, absolutely confident, that cannot happen. That because of the close attention to this now, that the crime is properly being recorded by the police. And in terms of a priority for me, it certainly became obvious during the campaign. The various business meetings that I went to, the business community felt that their concerns were not being sufficiently addressed, which is why I, together with my colleague in West Mercia, have decided to specifically single it out as one of 3 areas that we are going to allocate resources to. I'm do my best to maintain links with the business community, the Federation of Small Businesses. I try to go to the business breakfasts when I can, so I'm trying to make sure that I do have good, close links with the business community and listen closely to what they have to say.
Okay. Councillor Fowler wanted to raise a question about rural crime.
My question was around rural crime, and there's a particular representative in your report from North Warwickshire, and a number of meetings I've attended, and very different representations I've had from farmers, etc., talking about theft of fuel and other materials from their farms and other properties, etc. I'm pleased to see that there is now a rural crime strategy and panel or board, should I say, to tackle this. I just wondered, how confident are you at the moment, without patronising there, how confident are you that rural crime is being dealt with? And as it's been mentioning about crime strategies, what measures are being taken for the future to tackle rural crime?
Okay, the question is to do with rural crime and basically asking what measures we are taking to ensure that it remains one of the priorities. Well, similarly, refer to they're beginning to sound like PMQs here. I'll refer the honourable member to the answer I gave a few moments ago. We have singled it out as an important area, and particularly there's a problem over definition as to what constitutes rural crime. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, rural crime is crime that happens in rural areas. So it isn't only to deal with theft of fuel or theft of tractors. I mean, if you live in a rural area, then there are specific problems that you have in that your remote location gives particular problems. Nationally, a body has been set up of commissioners, and it's called the Rural Crime Network, and there are, I believe it's 18 commissioners now. It's of that order, and we are one of the areas who are signed up to the Rural Crime Network. And that's going to be a body which shares good practice and shares information about appropriately dealing with crime that happens in rural areas. One area that I would really like to progress, and it's like so many things, there are so many demands, is we would love to get some volunteers in rural areas. We have plenty of people. When I'm out on my bike, I often come across people on horseback riding around rural areas, and if we could recruit, we are increasingly using volunteers and members of the public, but as sort of eyes and ears, there are people out there on days like today who see things and would be a very useful information network. So that is an idea that we've talked about a number of times. It's really just a case of finding the time and the money to progress it. But it is a priority for us.
Councillor Poole?
Something supplementary to that question. What are you area commissioners for then? The ambassadors?
Yes. The supplementary question is to do with the community safety ambassadors. In my view, we cannot have too many people out there. If I could recruit the entire population of Warwickshire as volunteers helping us, that would be tremendously useful.
What are they doing? What are they doing now if you say it's not enough?
Well, no, what they...
People originate out there. What are we here for then?
What they are doing is, quite specifically, they're allocated... this is a question to do with our community safety ambassadors. And what are they doing? They are... we're very close to having one community safety ambassador for each of the community forum areas for Warwickshire. Their role is to use that geographic area as their base to be responsible for being my eyes and ears. The police authority had 17 members who could go to or share out these meetings. Basically, there's me and Eric. There's no way we could do that. So the way of dealing with that problem was to recruit a number of people, and in this case it's 30 because of the 30 community safety areas, community forum areas, and their role is to become local eyes and ears, and that means going to the community forum meetings, liaising with the Safer Neighbourhood teams, liaising with the local neighbourhood watch, and any other groups that are appropriate in their area. So, for instance, in a rural area, that may be the local branch of the NFU, or it's really down to them to be it's a communication network for me to keep me informed, and it's independent of police information, to keep me informed of what's going on out there in Warwickshire. And I can't have too many sources for information. So if other members of the panel want to report stuff, fine. I say I can't have too many sources of information.
Councillor Chataway?
Yeah, I want to comment a little bit later on the agenda about the role of community safety.
Well, Councillor Fowler was scheduled to ask a question on this. Do you want to ask it now, Councillor Fowler, since we're on community safety ambassadors?
Yes, I think as you said, Commissioner, first of all, it is early days with the ambassadors, and I guess I am looking at sort of achievements they've done to date, and the sort of meetings that they are attending. And have you discovered anything that is a surprise or new to you since they've been in situ? I think one of the questions as well is that a lot of us do attend area forums, and are the police there as well, doing the job of an ambassador at the same time?
Okay, and this is a question about, again, the role of the community safety ambassadors. And
I think the particular question was about whether you've learned anything new from them or any surprises from them.
Well, what I have now is a set of reports from the community safety ambassadors. So apart from anything else, I can be confident that the information that I'm getting is correct. The alternative is I would have to rely on the police for information. This in no way undermines what I said about the good relationship I have, a very good relationship I have with the police. But it could be that it would be inconvenient to highlight problems to me for some reason. And so from the outset, I determined that I needed an independent source of information around the county. It is very low cost. The system is very low cost. It's less than £30,000 a year to have 30 people engaged and reporting back to me. So the system, we did not do a good enough job of selling the system or announcing the system to start with. And I think there have been a few issues over that. We've had one or two issues over community safety ambassadors who didn't understand the role. And it very specifically is not to represent me. It is to report back. So that's why we've stressed the eyes and ears element of the job.
We are due as a panel to have a further report on community safety ambassadors at our meeting in September. Isn't that right, Georgina? So that has been scheduled for us. And I think the issues that the panel has raised are about the need for ambassadors and about their effectiveness, okay, and whether you're learning things from them that you wouldn't learn easily from other sources, such as councillors and community safety staff and so on. Councillor Chataway, did you want to follow that up?
There's a couple of questions in your answer which I think need to just be explored a little bit. First of all, I accept that there's going to be a report back on community safety ambassadors. And like Peter, I chair a community forum where the community safety ambassadors come along, and I know the guy well, and he's a very good guy, very committed to the local community. But my problem is chairing a community forum is that, like you said, it's not Ron Ball, he's not a member of the police. It's their role, as you have said, Ron, is to look, listen and report back.
Yeah.
And like you say, the very cheap cost of 30k a year. But if that's all you want from a community safety ambassador at my forum, I can send you a set of minutes and it'll cost 30k a year. That's the first point. I think their role needs to be a little bit more defined, and I'd be interested to see how you get that role, because for me as community forum chair, having issues raised to me by the police or on police issues, and my only avenue is to say, well, we'll get report back from on board. I think I want a little bit more than that. The much other point you were talking about was trying to recruit volunteers and piece of work, what you've done on that. I'm wondering if you've done any work into looking at what the barriers are, or what the barriers have been to recruiting volunteers. Because clearly, I don't think you're satisfied with the progress you're making on that at the moment, from the way you answered the question. I'm just wondering how you intend to try and solve this problem, or solve this particular issue of getting more volunteers.
Okay, so question relates to getting volunteers and we're investigating the barriers to getting volunteers. I think we would not be the only people in the community who have difficulty getting people to volunteer. I think that is acknowledged as being a generalised problem. Having said that, I wouldn't like to overestimate the problem. In that we did not have particular difficulty in getting the people to volunteer to be community safety ambassadors. In terms of our special constables who are volunteers, we're not struggling in terms of numbers of volunteers. The problem we have with special constables is the training capacity to get them online. And we've just, at the for the youth, we're just starting with a cadet scheme. The first Warwickshire cadets will be signed up in September. And we're also just starting a Citizens Academy, which is an idea that is a British idea that got taken over to the United States and is being re-imported again. And this is all about involving more members of the public to have an appreciation of the police, a better appreciation of the police and what they do. So I don't see. Are we flooded with volunteers? No. Are we desperate for volunteers? No. We have a good supply of volunteers. We could do with more. We could always do with more, but it's not a major problem.
Okay. Yes.
I noticed in your report about increasing their visibility in the community. One thing I do have a concern about, is particularly like Richard, is with elected members, because a lot of residents will approach their borough, town or county councillors, who will in turn then, if needs be, talk to their local constabulary on their behalf. And I think there's going to be a bit of confusion about talking to an ambassador who is there to listen, but to report back to you. Which I then, as we said before, I know it's early days and I appreciate that, but I just think as elected members, I think some of us have this frustration and confusion about actually who is represented then as we are elected members. And again, how much more work are we doing, as I've always emphasised, the more work that we should do, and the police and the commissioner should do with the Neighbourhood Watch. We have lots of volunteers in the Neighbourhood Watch. We have people within the Neighbourhood Watch who work with people who actually who are going out with the horses, etc., training and taking people out on horses. So again, that's a good help on your ruralness. I'm just a little bit concerned that an ambassador might be seen as doing more than what that person should actually be doing, if I've got that right.
Can I suggest, Ron, that we ask for you to, in your report back to us in September, you try and address these questions, focus on what the ambassadors are doing, what the added value to you is, and ensuring that they don't overlap or undermine the role of councillors. That's I think what councillors' major concern is.
Yes, very happy to do that.
And also report on what their effectiveness has been.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, more than happy.
So you're happy for that, members? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Shall we move on? Alliance governance, Nicola.
Okay. The question's to do with the Alliance Governance Group, whether it's effective, whether it's doing the job there, whether it's overcomplicated. Would I be reading into the question there something that you... Okay. 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 Right. Okay. Well, we inherited a thing called the Joint Steering Group, which we didn't feel was doing the job at all. But to be fair to the police, I mean, this was a massive programme. The Alliance programme was a massive programme that was well underway when Bill Longmore and I got elected. So it's really not surprising that they did not think of, let's design a governance system that includes these new people coming along, because that's not what happened. So it took both of us a little while to get our feet under the table. Once we'd done that, we were of the view that this machine, if you like, the Alliance, was going along, and we did not have enough of a handle on it, and we did not have sufficient input from the force, or we weren't having enough. That's why we decided to set up the Alliance Governance Group, which is now what we have. Is it there are still some elements of that old problem. And the difficulty is, we've got two very large organisations trying to do something that is really difficult here, with tremendous success. I mean, if you look at what the Alliance has done, it has done something that's not been achieved anywhere else in the country, in terms of aligning terms and conditions and working practices, and done that at the same time as increasing performance, so that the figures have gone down, and increasing public satisfaction. And I think it is absolutely remarkable. Now, to a certain extent, I think the reasons for the success is because it's probably been over-managed and over-engineered. Our view, I think it would be fair to say now, is to look at it, not the Alliance Governance Group level is probably about right, what we have there. There are two bodies now. There's the Change Management Board and the Design Authority Group, who are looking at the next phase of savings, and we are just beginning to ask questions about whether that isn't too big and cumbersome and unwieldy. In terms of the significant decisions that are being taken as far as the Alliance is concerned, they now need to come to the Alliance Governance Group. So I'm now confident that, which I can't say I was before, that I'm now confident that anything of real significance is appearing in my office or on my desk, and so we're having an input to it. And now's probably a good time to, since you've raised that, I mean, there's a decision just been taken as of last week about, and this is a step towards making the Alliance work better and strengthening and deepening the Alliance, and that's to do with control centres. And the decision was taken on Friday that Leek Wootton will continue as the Warwickshire Control Centre. There's what's happening over in West Mercia is slightly more complicated, but effectively we're going to have one control centre on two sites. And so as part of that process, we're going to start looking at harmonising the IT across both. There will probably be some investment, almost certainly be some investment in Hindlip, and that will be Alliance investment, so we'll be making a contribution to that. And as a result of the decision I've taken on Friday, the West Mercia will, for the moment, keep two control centres, probably as far as 2017. But if you look at it in the round, it is Warwickshire's interests have been well looked after. I feel completely confident that Warwickshire's interests have been well looked after. This is a decision that was taken by both commissioners, both deputies. We've got the chief constables on board as well, and it is a significant step towards us working ever closer together. Yeah. Monthly. The group meets on a monthly basis. So far it's been on a Friday afternoon, and we've decided that's not the best time. So we're looking at changing the date for that. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Chataway.
Yeah, I appreciate and colleagues appreciate the complexity of getting agreements between two very large organisations. I think what concerns me a little bit is, I think you're on record of saying on Matt and on somebody else, that how far can our Alliance go before it becomes a merger? I think that's one issue. Another issue around Alliance governance.
So the question was, when does an alliance become a merger, effectively? Part of my role is to hold the Chief Constable to account. How do you scrutinise what's going on? And in terms of the money spent, are we ensuring that Warwickshire money is being spent in Warwickshire and that we're not cross-subsidising to the detriment of Warwickshire? Would that be a fair way of putting it? From the outset, I've been absolutely clear, and it doesn't matter how many times I say it, I will continue to say it. I'm a total 100% supporter of the alliance. That does not inevitably mean that the forces are on course to merge. What I see the alliance as is Warwickshire being an independently funded, independent force playing its part in the most imaginative and the most effective collaboration arrangements that are happening in policing in Britain, and most imaginative by a considerable margin. And it's the police authority who deserve the credit for this. I mean, they came up with the idea, and I don't tire of giving them the credit for it because they deserve it. It has worked incredibly well for both forces, and one of the reasons why it has worked so well is because on both sides of the fence people have not spent their time looking too closely at every item by item. Are we getting our fair share here? It took a much more expansive view to be taken to get the alliance to work, and that happened from the outset, and that's why we're in the healthy position that we are now. There's a 69-31 split in terms of almost everything that you look at, and that's the formula that has been used, and that's why we are in. That's the reason I'm able to sit here today and talk about officer numbers as I have, is because the alliance has worked, and it has worked so well, for instance, for us. If Warwickshire had been left outside the alliance, in my view, it would not have survived, as it's just too small, and the cuts would have been too drastic. Where the decision-making happens, in fact, we just need to acknowledge how generous West Mercia are, because although there is a 69-31 split in terms of resources, in terms of decision-making, it's 50-50. And that requires great magnanimity on their part, and they accept that. And that's the way the alliance works, and that's the only way that I see the alliance going forward.
69-31 split then reflect the resources what Warwickshire put into the alliance?
There are certain resources that are Warwickshire's. You know, our resources are our resources. As and when Leek wouldn't get sold, or bits of Leek wouldn't get sold, those resources will go into Warwickshire's pot. That's not alliance money. That's Warwickshire's. So
that has been explained to us before. Councillor Chataway, that has been explained to us before when we dealt with the budget. The 69-31 split has been explained to us in considerable detail as a funding model that has been well established, well researched, and so that's old business. I'm sorry to cut you off on that. Okay. Anything else on that particular subject, on governance of the alliance? Okay. Councillor Philip Morris-Jones had some questions about independent custody visitors.
Yes, briefly. I've had a long association with this over many years, and I'm pleased to see that the Commissioner is attending the meetings of these dedicated volunteers. They're highly important. Next to our Breakfast and Stabbury, they're the most important volunteer organisation we have. And these people give up a lot of their spare time to safeguard the interests of people who are in custody. And it's important that they are very decided amongst themselves not to use the life sign monitors which had been installed there at great expense. They were the instrument whereby you could remotely tell whether a person was active and breathing or not, in which case you went and did something about it. So I'd be interested to know, as a matter of detail, whether these instruments are being used and whether the level of scrutiny from your office is such that you would take up issues such as that and make sure that everything is done absolutely right, particularly the medical care. If it was a very haphazard system, they would give a diagnosis over the telephone from some doctor who'd been engaged to be duty surgeon. Most unsatisfactory and had led to deaths in custody. So I do hope that all these final points are being kept up to date.
Okay, the question to do with independent custody visitors and specifically to do with equipment that effectively monitors people in custody to specifically concerned with deaths in custody and whether we are giving that sufficient attention. To be honest, the system that I inherited as far as independent custody visitors concerned was inadequate. We were not giving sufficient recognition to those volunteers. I absolutely concur with your view that they are invaluable, do really good work, and as you've pointed out, I do try to get to meetings or certainly make sure one of the office staff gets to meetings where possible. We are now in a much better position because of staff I have recruited. That is now a specific responsibility for a very, very good member of staff, and so we are giving them a much better service in terms of just basic things like whether they have passes or not, and training and those sort of areas. So we are, I hope, and this is the feedback I've had to date, we are actually giving them much better service. In terms of the specific question you ask about that equipment, I can't, in all honesty, put my hand on my heart now and answer that. But what I will do is I'll take the question away. I'm just seeing if can we answer that question specifically? Yeah.
Specifically on the right side, on the right side, that's limited. No, but what I can be specific about is that we get reports and they are followed up by our office rigorously. And interestingly, we've done some training recently with the independent custody visitors and to be joint training for custody staff, because there was a clear breakdown in the understanding of their respective roles, and we got a sergeant there who had background in training and very successful, should we say, marketing day, where we dealt with things like fundamentally day-to-day, when they put the reports in, copies come to the office, they're logged, and they actually take issues with reports.
We would like, I think, some reassurance that that system is all working well, and we thought the best way of doing that would be to have the panel chairpersons just come to us, maybe once a year, but maybe once anyway, just so we hear from them directly about how they think the system is working. Okay. So we will ask them to come to a future meeting. Okay. Yes, Eric.
In that case, Chairman, there's a single alliance package around health and well-being of those in custody. It might be useful for the panel to actually look at that.
Okay. That'd be helpful. We could have that as paperwork when they come. And there were two other areas of questioning. One is on page 32, Councillor Coker.
Question of domestic abuse, which is obviously a very difficult subject as far as doing the balance. We recognise that there is a proper conversion rate relating to it, and you're going to explore that. What have you got in mind?
The picture initially in this area was quite confusing in that the initial data that I heard, this is as a result of the HMIC report that came out, put Warwickshire in a really poor position, in fact bottom by some measures, and then very that was very swiftly followed by the full report that said that actually, in terms of domestic abuse, Warwickshire is in quite a healthy position. So it obviously became a topic for discussion with the Chief Constable, and there is some detailed work now being done by the force to deal with specific recommendations. And I think probably the best thing I can do is hand you over to Neil, who can fill you in on that.
Interestingly, the inspection by the last inspection staff didn't pick up on this point. This came from the Freedom of Information request from a newspaper. But we looked at one, and actually the force's action plan, which has come as a result of the inspection, didn't include this either. And we felt it was an omission, which is why it's in the paper here. There's an aspiration for us to focus on through the next 12 months. And I think we've shared this with chief officers, as Robin's mentioned, and I think the chief officers are concerned about the quality of the investigation by the police officers, which results in files going to the Crown Prosecution Service or not to case worker. And I think there's a real drive in that area to improve the performance of the police in terms of the way they investigate these things, which then lends itself to more prosecutions. So that's what that's about. It's really us as an office picking up that we think quite important issue with people at Warwickshire, making sure it doesn't get lost out of, which is why it's included in here. It's included in the professional police and crime plan. Not specifically, it isn't included there. It was included in the letter that we wrote to the Home Secretary in response to the inspection that took place. So it's quite visible. I have an officer in the office who's got domestic abuse in his core functions, and he's acutely aware of this. We need to work with the force in improving this. If we can improve this, it brings more confidence, I think greater reporting, better service to the victims.
Okay.
I have some experience in this, fortunately not on a personal level, but it is an important issue. I would certainly welcome knowing what comes out of it.
Okay. So report back on that, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy.
Councillor Davis again.
Cheers. The question deals with particularly sexual violence and the low percentage of reports within Warwickshire that end up as convictions. Chargeable caution, yeah. But, yeah, okay. And then in terms of what information we would be prepared to share with the panel in terms of the work that's done by the Chief Constable. In terms of, let me take the latter question first. What information we can share, even if we need to do it in a closed session. I mean, at this stage, I don't know, to be honest, whether that would need to be. But in terms of the panel, I can see absolutely no reason why we shouldn't share that information with you. In terms of the low charge or conviction percentage, it's the closer you look at this, the more complicated it becomes. Let me say straight away that I would agree with the aspiration behind the question, that I'm sure we would all like to see genuine accusations of rape treated absolutely seriously, and if there is a possibility of charge, conviction, whatever, that being pursued. One of the complicating factors is actually the victim, because there is and I think this is absolutely right, a priority given to what their wishes are, and often that's not clear, and their position changes as well. So let me say absolutely straight away that that figure is not acceptable, and that's been raised with the Chief Constable, and we are doing some work around that area. But as I say, it is this and the domestic abuse area in general. It's often not as straightforward as we would all like it to be.
Yes, Nicola.
Clearly it is complex, and I think we all acknowledge that. But other forces have a rate of agency and
Yeah.
we have 6%.
Yeah.
So other forces are dealing with that complexity in a way that seems to be producing a more significant outcome.
But
one of the things I'd like to know is, for example, have you challenged the Chief Constable in terms of what training is being given to officers to deal with these sorts of crimes when they're reported to them, so that actually, the victims have that confidence to follow through the process when it's important.
yeah, what I can say that would be helpful. Sue Ingram for the county, who deals with this, is very. She has made it clear to me that she thinks that Warwickshire officers now are not only much better than they used to be, they are in a good position and they understand the issues. This quite well. One of the reasons for the low figures may be that Warwickshire is doing a good job early, and that could be distorting the figures. There could be early interventions that are actually dealing with the issues before they become serious. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I absolutely understand where the question is coming from, and whatever information we can provide you with, we will do that. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Shedwell.
One issue I think we've got around it, and again, I'm not position in any way, shape or form, is that this agenda is recognised at national level. And I was at the meeting with the LGA on State Responsible about how we're still trying to get grips in individual areas and coming through and how certain things are working in one area, don't necessarily work in another area. It's kind of that position. I'm just wondering, we've just got a piece of work in the county about supporting victims of troubled families. And that troubled families side is starting to, and Phil touched that a little bit more on this, is starting to identify issues which cause issues in troubled families and how that system works, which domestic violence has been one of the indicators within there that's come out of the work that's done. And I think one way to improve, if I like it, put this way, improve our performance in that, is I still think there's still a lot of linking up of various agencies' agendas to do to make progress on this issue. I just wondered if you've got a view, if that's a piece of work you might consider taking on board as well, or if it's worth how we
Yeah.
various agendas, well, on domestic violence, on troubled families, on women, even to a degree in hate crime.
Yeah, the question is related to this complicated area. Is not effectively not just a policing issue, that there are other agencies involved as well. And are we doing enough? Are we doing enough joined up work to do that as effectively as we can? I just, as I say, the person I deal with in the county concerning this is Sue Ingram, and she has not quite the opposite. I mean, she assures me that actually the collaboration work that's done in this area is good. and that she went to a training, for instance, a training course about 2 months ago to do with DVPOs, domestic violence prevention orders, and there were 3 forces represented there across the country, and Warwickshire was one of them. So at this stage, I'm not aware of anything any glaring things that could be done that we are not doing. Having said that, I mean, clearly the issue that Nicola has raised is important, and we need to fill that space. You know, what to me at the moment, and I have asked the questions, is are we doing as much as we can do? Are we working as well as we can with our partners? And basically the story I'm getting back there is good, but the raw statistic is not good, and we just need to be able to explain that or do something about that even better.
I think a report back on that as Nicola has requested. Councillor Parsons?
Very quickly, I was just going to say, I did find implication that Warwickshire might be getting earlier and doing better. Yeah, that may be the case, but it strikes me as being a little bit complacency to you. I mean, I think personally, Chief Constable should be looking at other forces where they are getting a better rate of going to court, and that would seem to be an obvious thing to do, essentially. I know that one doesn't fit all.
Is that being done, do you know?
I believe it is. Yeah, we need to bring a report back, don't we? Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just make a point of process which ties in with that and virtually every issue we've talked about? We're looking at the annual report.
Yes.
Which is a snapshot in time.
Yes, last year.
At a previous meeting, we looked at the Police and Crime Plan 2013 to 17,
Yeah.
which is the forward agenda. This is what's happened. This is what's going to happen. It might be a worthwhile panel thinking next year about trying to align these two to one meeting. So the Commissioner would say, that's what did happen, that's what is going to happen. So, for example, we've now got a Police and Crime Plan bracketed with the county community safety plan, which is much more all-embracing than it ever has been before. And in that, Commissioner Fitch, it is a key priority to work with the Chief Constable to further understand all the issues around violence against women, girls, and domestic violence. So
Yeah. I think you're right, Eric. I think it is easier to look at something that has been done and something that's going to be done in the future at the same time, because often the answers to the questions about what's happened in the past are about what you're going to do in the future, and they're incorporated in that. So that will be helpful if that can be done, but I'm not sure about the timing, because we want to try and have some influence on the plan, and having some influence on the plan in July is not terribly good. So I think we need to have influence on the plan before the plan is agreed for the year. So I think it's a good idea, but I'm not sure it's practical. Okay, any other questions on the annual report? Anything else anybody wants to raise on the annual report? Okay, thank you very much. We move on to the joint property vehicle. I must say I found this immensely complex as an area. It's not something I'd come across before. Do you want to give us, or does somebody want to give us a brief explanation of what the joint property vehicle is?
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll first say that David Clark would have been here to deliver this himself, so he passes on his apologies. So, David sits on the steering group, which is effectively a shadow shareholder group, as it's called at this point in time, along with myself. So David represents the PCC, the 2 PCCs on that particular board at this point, and I represent the 2 forces. Just a quick update as to who I am. Slight interjection earlier. My name is Richard Alkin. I'm the Director of Enabling Services. So effectively the property portfolio and the management and its as an asset function sits within my directorate for both forces. So I am a joint appointee between Warwickshire and West Mercia in terms of the alliance. So just a bit of background in terms of the
Thank you.
The initiative, the paper itself is I hoped it was going to be quite straightforward in terms of just setting out the framework. But the initiative was born out agencies had similar plans around what they were planning to do with buildings in certain areas. And for the police, for instance, the police and the fire brigade, there's a site in Bromsgrove, a brand new site in Bromsgrove, which effectively was a result of that particular group looking at the plans across the various agencies and saying, you know what, you two public bodies have got an agenda that you're looking at the same time in that area, so shouldn't you be talking together to do something a bit more creative? So it's led to those bespoke building projects across various areas of Worcestershire in particular, so across the whole of West Mercia, just Worcestershire at that point. But because of the success of that group, it was a bunch of chief executives, chief from West Mercia, police was part of it, the chief fire officer was part of it, asked the question about a broader alliance, a broader consideration of that sort of approach, which would bring in more agencies into that debate, particularly on the back of the agenda that was circulating at that point in time, which is the One Town approach, where the initiative is to look at the totality of what's going on in public services in a geographical area, and that's a town, or how you draw that area is quite broad, but to look at the totality of public services in that area, not just from a property point of view, but from a service delivery to the public point of view. And I'm sure that members of this particular panel are well aware of that as an initiative in a general sense. So that's how it was born. The Alliance, through its assignment, or Warwickshire, through its relationship through the Alliance with West Mercia, clearly becomes part of that discussion on the basis that the Alliance does things once. There is only one property function in the Alliance at this point in time. So I only have one head of property, one function that runs all of the properties that are in Warwickshire and West Mercia at this point in time. Properties are still owned by the two PCs. The governance in terms of any decision making is still owned by the PCCs, but sitting within my directorate is only one function. And back to the point earlier, that was done early to make sure we've got that single view across what's going on in the Alliance, across a whole range of what I call enabling services at that point in time. So moving on, the lead for the actual piece of work, the project manager, is actually the Alliance's head of estates at this point in time. We contributed that individual into the project on the basis that it's better to be part of it and be seen to be engaged with it and hopefully leading many aspects of it rather than be watching from the outside. To deal with any issues, we are fully refunded for that, so putting somebody else into that post, that is fully funded by the Alliance project, by the JPB project itself, but that was a quite bold step in terms of stepping up and saying, we'll put somebody in to lead that. Paragraph 2.5 sets out the range of agencies that were initially involved and gives you a flavour that there's an additional one that's been added. There's one that's dropped out, which is the Worcestershire Health and Care Trust. That's a very specific technical reason they've had to drop out. Their rules of engagement around this sort of thing say that they cannot be owners of a company, and therefore they've had to drop out as being a partner in the JPV, but they are still engaged as part of the work in terms of they will actively be seeking to take services from that particular initiative if we decide to move it ahead. And very recently, Herefordshire have joined the JPV. It sounds like there's something there. When I talk about JPV, it's just a project at this point in time, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The stage that we've been through to date is to develop the outline business case. And again, I apologise if I'm teaching people how to sort of capable respect of knowing this, but the outline business case is the very high-level strategic case. It looks at the objectives that were set in terms of what this particular entity might be, and I will come to that in a moment, and starts to look at, is there some reality to it? Is there a outline case that says this is worth looking at and worth moving forward? And that outline case came before all of the agencies that are party to this in the spring, and was signed off to move to the full business case. And that's the stage we're at this point in time. The full business case is, as you would expect to see, is now into the detail. It's now right down to designing what the governance would look like, designing what the management arrangements would look like, designing what the kind of objectives that the actual company itself might actually have, and how that might convert into benefits both to the public in terms of service provision, but also benefits in terms of the agencies in terms of cost reductions or increases in services, service quality and service delivery that may not be there at this point in time. And the reason why I say about service delivery is because there is a wide range of agencies, as you can see, some big, some much smaller, with property getting very highly specialist in a lot of the functions that have to be carried out on buildings. Some of the agencies find that very difficult to hold that full range of people. They're having to contract in at a significant cost. The beauty of putting it all together at that end of the spectrum is that those services can be built into the arrangement, and because of the overall size, effectively it drives down the cost. I'll come back to that, as I say, in a minute. A shadow shareholder group has been created. I'll start from the back. Right. The actual initiative itself, a joint property vehicle, effectively what it means is one single property function that will run all of the estate for those partners. So I said a few moments ago, Warwickshire and West Mercia Police have already got only one property function that runs all of the estate for those two agencies. What this is about doing is saying, create a publicly owned company, and I'll come back to the rationale as to why it's of that nature, under a very specific set of legislation, to effectively take over responsibility for the management of all property in those partners that are signed up. Okay? It's not constrained only to that, because the spread of partners does not go across the whole geography of all of the partners that are engaged. So West Mercia, for instance, and Warwickshire are an alliance, and there's only one partner in Warwickshire that signed up to exploring this, which is Warwickshire Police. Okay? But what we don't want to do, for instance, in terms of Warwickshire, is forgo the ongoing conversations that we're having about service provision with many other agencies, many other partners at this point in time. The company has still got to be able to work with the range of partners that exist within any of those partners' geographic areas. So we will still be talking to councils, we will still be talking to National Health, we will still be talking to other agencies in respect of how it is that we can drive a different approach to the way we actually provide both our estate, ours in terms of the police estate, and in partnership the services that we deliver to the public through our estate and also partnership arrangements. And I'll come back to that in terms of some of the issues that are recorded under 3.6. What it would be is a wholly publicly owned company, set up under the TECL arrangements, which effectively go back over quite a long time in terms of a ruling back in about 1998 about the ability of public bodies to create entities to deliver services without having to worry about all of the encumbrances of European legislation about tendering, etc., in terms of providing those services between each other. We can go into a lot more detail. That means a specialist sitting in front here that I want to defer to any really technical questions, but in general terms, it is a legal framework through which public bodies can create an entity, in this case a publicly owned company, to then deliver services back into the range of companies that are actually owners of that particular, the range of partners, that are owners of that particular company. You have to pass a couple of tests, very specific tests, in order to be able to make sure that you comply with that TECL arrangement, and that particular piece of work is currently being assessed by lawyers in terms of what the ultimate structure and service delivery will be of this particular arrangement. The big figures that are there, which is under 3.4, are to be pretty conservative, in terms of looking at it at this point in time. They arise in sort of three stratas, really. The first strata is there clearly will be economies of scale when you simply put 5 or 6 property functions together. For a start-up, you only need one head of property. You might pay that individual more because of the scope of that, but clearly there will be a reduction in numbers of people at a management level in managing the arrangements that we're talking about. in specialists to fulfil parts of their statutory duties which they cannot sustain in terms of internal resources. Again, the ability when you aggregate this up in a much bigger organisation, some of those resources actually you can get in-house. You get them in-house, they will be of a lesser value of a lesser cost than at present. So that's the first layer, and that's just about economies of scale of joining various functions together. The next layer is in terms of contracting out. So each one of those partners at the moment contracts out through a whole range of arrangements for things like cleaning, for things like janitor services, waste services, etc., etc. When you scale up again, your ability to influence the marketplace is very different, and so there are expected to be economies of scale that we can get from the way that contracting is carried out across that range of agencies going forward. And all of this is being explored through the final business case to try and work out the reality behind that. The original estimates, you can see in the paper from a revenue point of view, when it's fully up and running, we're talking about just over £15 million per annum between those various agencies. They're big figures. It's worth looking at from that point of view. The third layer of benefit comes from, effectively, that rationalisation of the overall estate. So the ability to look more holistically at what are the services that are being provided in a geographical area, and what does that mean for the range of estate that could be possible to be implemented in that particular geographic area. The clear commitment is, and it's very clear in the paper, this is not about, the company will not own the estate of any one of the partners. Partners will continue to own the estate. The phrase that's been used is in terms of sovereignty. Sovereignty over decision making about their own individual estate will remain with the partners. So this isn't about some company being set up and they then decide and take ownership of the properties in terms of decision making. The company will run those properties. They'll run the services that are actually necessary to make sure that those properties are fit for purpose, etc., etc. They will also provide a set of professional services to advise the partners on future estate strategies. And it's an advisory capacity, and the final decision making will rest with each one of the partners, whether they sign up or not. So that's the stage we're in at this point in time. In signing off the outline business case, there were three areas of concern that the police registered as part of signing off, and they are featuring as very specific work streams within this final business case piece of work. The first one was, on behalf of both Warwickshire and West Mercia, the partnership, the range of partners does not align with the total geography of what is the alliance. So in Shropshire, for instance, you'll see there's no partners that are listed, and in Warwickshire there are no other partners that are listed other than the police. And so we needed to seek very specific assurances that the good work that we've been doing over the past 6 years or more now in Warwickshire, and much longer than that in terms of other strategies, which is about having conversations with partners about the way we deliver services through a shared service provision, that will continue under this particular company. Because the focus of the company when it was first being talked about was one town. That works when you've got a range of agencies in that town, but in terms of Warwick, for instance, there's only the police. And therefore we need to make sure that the company's skills in dealing with a one-town approach would still be applied to the police's conversations with our partners in places like Warwickshire and Shropshire, as we develop our front office strategies, as we develop our service delivery strategies, etc., etc. In the way that you will have seen across all of your areas of business going on for the last few years or so in terms of developing safer neighbourhood bases, developing front offices, etc., etc. And we needed specific assurances that just because there weren't partners at this point in time in those geographic areas, that approach would continue. And the answer is it will. We would be delighted if this does take off, that other partners join in with it. And that's an issue for other partners in terms of how they run their business. And certainly the business case that will come out in October will not be dependent on any other partners other than the ones that are currently signed up to it. Business case needs to stand based on those that are actually signing up to it, rather than any future aspirations about whoever else might sign up to it as we go forward. The second one was, as a result of some experience that both David Clark and myself had, and Sarah will know this, in terms of setting up or potentially seeking to set up publicly owned companies. There was an initiative around learning development a few years ago that David Clark and I were involved with. We have some quite specific experience around that, understanding the technical debate and what the parameters actually have to be before you can actually satisfy that. Because if you can't satisfy that, then this initiative will not work. They centre on some very specific tests called the control test and the function test. Basically, the control test is simply about that you are able to exercise the same controls over that company as you would have done if it was your in-house function. In short term, much more complex than that, Sarah, but in shorthand terms, that's one test. And the functional test is one that says, basically, the vast majority of the services that that company has to provide have to be back into the public service. They can't be commercialised to an extent that gives the company a commercial edge to it beyond a certain limit. And that limit is generally about 10% of its business. So we need to make sure that that's a very clear focus. There are other tests that have to be actually met as well, but we wanted a very specific set of work done around that, because if we can't satisfy that in the way the companies plan to work, then effectively the initiative won't be taken forward. And the third area is one of overall governance in terms of how the decision making and the governance proposals came out in the outline business case. The decision making and the ownership of this company is one partner, one share. Okay? So any partner going into this arrangement has one share. Okay? Irrespective of your size. So Warwickshire and West Mercia going into this, probably about a fifth to a quarter of the overall business for the arrangement. Worcestershire County Council, probably slightly higher than that, about a third, something like that. So the two big players are Worcestershire County Council and the police. And as you can see, there's a range of other partners. And every partner has one share. And the arrangement was also saying that it would be majority voting. Quite obviously, from Ron's point of view in terms of, or the PCC's point of view in terms of ownership of property, the PCC wanted to be assured that effectively decisions couldn't be taken that ultimately were to the disbenefit of the police. So that's a very specific piece of work that's going on at this point in time. It talks about that. I'm sitting on that particular work stream. We met yesterday. It was a very fruitful conversation yesterday where we aired our views and aired our positions on that. We appreciate that the smaller players clearly very happy with one party, one vote, or one partner, one vote. The bigger players have some observations around that, and they were shared yesterday. My personal opinion is that I think we got very close to a resolution to all of that yesterday, but there's still some more work to be done. Where we're going from here is the final business case, which is October of this year, and we're on track at this point in time to get to that position. There are no decisions that are being taken at this point in time, other than, yes, we want to explore moving to the final business case. And that will come out between October and December, to then get fed back into the governance arrangements of each of the agencies to say, and each of the partners to say, are we now seeing enough in the full business case that gives us the confidence to move forward? Interestingly, it is a very, very specific initiative that's being looked at by the government. They, in terms of the shadow shareholder group that I just talked about, Bruce Mann, who's the Director of Finance and Resources at the Cabinet Office, agreed to take over the chair of that. That's a two-way issue. Obviously, the government wanted to actually make sure that they had a very close alignment in terms of looking at this particular initiative. Bruce brings with him effectively the government property department, who are also very interested in, if this thing flies in terms of its particular, we take it on and make it happen, then you can appreciate there's another massive portfolio project of property in this region, which is owned by the government, and Bruce is very keen to make sure that would be considered amongst any outcome that comes from this. The other side to it is for us. I mean, Bruce is connected within the government. It's allowed us to secure some very innovative funding streams to fund the work that's been going on to date, some of which is shown there. That's not the totality. There was nearly 600,000 in the first stage that we got from the government to push forward that particular aspect. At this point in time, this whole piece of work has cost us nothing. It's all been secured from external funding, whether it be innovation funds or whether it be government funding, etc., etc. Clearly, if we decide to move ahead, there will be set-up costs that have to be incurred, and that's what we're testing through the business case, is what's the payback on those set-up costs. At the moment, it looks like those set-up costs would be actually paid back in less than half a year in terms of the savings that could be made simply in the first year alone. But that's part of the work that's currently taking place at this point in time. That's the outline of it. I don't know if that
Thank you.
made it simpler.
That's most helpful. Any questions from the panel? Firstly, Philip, then Bob, and then Councillor Chatterway.
I mean, the concept seems absolutely compelling, and I think there's unlimited scope for cost and efficiency savings. I think the general public would like to feel that the panel of professionals who form the decision makers on this body are those who perhaps may not have any commercial interest, but if they have any, to declare them most scrupulously. I can think back to some very ill-judged property decisions locally, and perhaps the crowning of all misjudgments must lie at the £500,000 fire control centre built in Wolverhampton, which was never used. Apparently it never has been used, but certainly not for that purpose to this day. And I'd like to feel that whilst this specialist organisation will deal with all the practicalities and technicalities of acquiring, building, selling properties, that the Commissioner and perhaps panels as well of our police authorities will have an input into the policy side, but the suitability and the policy decisions to be made, but not to interfere in the technicalities which will be entrusted to the new body.
Yep.
To answer that, the company was set up as an arm's length company, so it will have all of the facets of a company structure and the professionalism to run the nature of a company that's actually managing property. One of the benefits of setting up as a company is it allows us to attract the sort of resources that you need and the skills that you need to run property of that sort of magnitude across that sort of geography. But it's not chuck it across the fence and leave it. That's why you've got what will be running alongside that is a shareholder group. The shareholder group will have the responsibility for effectively signing off policies, practices, directions, strategies, asset management strategies of the company, because that's the ownership. The ownership remains with the public sector, and the ownership remains with the public sector bodies that sign up to it in order to make sure they govern that particular company in an appropriate manner.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
On a very practical level, going back a few years, Warwickshire Police had a programme of building professionalisation, parts of which were implemented, and other parts, such as the sale of Legal from memory developments at Southern, Rugby and Stratford, were put on hold because of the development of the Alliance. It was no longer a case of Warwickshire making its decisions, but it was the Alliance making the decisions. So that introduced considerable delays into the implementation of that programme. Two partners, complicated decision making, and then this feels at first hearing very unwieldy. Going back to the Commissioner's comments earlier about there will always be one Commissioner and one Chief Constable for each of the forces in the Alliance. Can you see this still giving the flexibility and the responsiveness to the Commissioner and the Chief Constable that they have now? Or is this going to produce another layer of decision making which, like the Alliance, further complicates and slows down what we need to do?
My response about the Alliance is going to be slightly challenging, probably, in terms of saying I get why things have to slow down, because quite simply, the choices that were being taken about where some of those services would be provided from going forward were up in the air in terms of saying, our plan to do X at that site is now questioned on the basis that we might not be delivering any service from that site until the Alliance.
I understand
how do you actually make sure that the sovereign interest of each of the parties is maintained in their ability to deliver their needs across the estate? That's the fundamental issue.
That's my question. Paul, much better than I.
Yeah, that's the fundamental issue that's being worked on through that particular arrangement. It's more complex than that in terms of also saying, how do you actually make sure that any one party's sovereign interest is not damaged by the other parties taking a decision that is actually negative for any one or two of the parties? And again, yesterday we had a very specific and detailed and good discussion around that, and came up with some proposals about how we think that could be addressed. That will be addressed in the final business case. The final business case will be presented to Ron and Ron's equivalent over at West Mercia and the two chief constables to give them that assurance. That's the assurance we're seeking in terms of making sure that if you're getting into this sort of partnership, you need to maintain that flexibility to be able to move your own business plans forward. The benefit for us is we've got tremendous experience in what's been going on in the alliance to be able to take that experience in and say, this is how you do this sort of stuff. This is how you actually tackle those sorts of issues. And if you don't have these sorts of things in place, then actually it won't work. So our involvement in this initiative is quite positive in that respect, in that we've got real experience on how you do that.
Councillor Chataway?
Yeah, I think what I've heard today is a very, very interesting concept. And I think, like most people sitting around this room, this will be the first we've heard of this very, very interesting concept. And there's a couple of things in the report which I think would go into great detail, but I don't think people have probably got the appetite for it at 20 past 12 after the 2-hour meeting. What it seems to be saying to me is that, if I'm right, you're setting up which in essence is a private company to run the property and the assets of all the organisations involved in there, and they'll then set the criteria for what you can do. You're also talking there about an initial cost of about 1.5 million, excluding redundancy costs. So I think the questions going forward, and perhaps another report if the chair or acting chair agrees on this, when you finish the business case, because the business case is being produced by, I don't know the name, Jim Stokey, who used to work with me, seconded back, who knows the property in Warwickshire and second J in C. As soon as that business case is there in front of you, I think you need, or this body will need to do a very robust scrutiny exercise on that particular business case, because clearly the people who are putting this together at the moment, choose my words very carefully, would be, I bought a t-shirt on your shirt, we put it that way, I thought it would benefit for JVC. I think what I would like to see going forward is that, first of all, I know who's going to remain redundant. Is it going to get a better service for Ron and the other police commissioner on how the properties, because you talked about deciding where services go and whatever. And I think it's very much down to the police to decide where services go, not a particular JVC or whatever it is. And I think that I might have read that wrong. So what I'm saying is that it's the first time I've heard it today. I think I've got a 3-page report or a 4-page report saying what the principles are. And I think there's a lot more work to be done before anyone's in a position to say how wonderful this is, like you seem to be suggesting this.
Can I sort of paraphrase maybe what Chris said? I mean, it seems to me, is there an opportunity for this panel to see the business case after the commissioners and chief constables have seen it, but before decisions have been made, so that we can exercise some scrutiny over it before the decisions are made?
Can I tackle that whole range? I'm not sitting here as a 100% supporter of this. I'm a chief officer who has all of the concerns that you're raising, and I'm carrying them through. But I'm not going to sit here and effectively not talk it up in terms of where we are at this point on, which is a whole set of work to answer those sorts of questions. So Ron, Eric and others know that in the debates that led to the outline business case, my report was very clear in terms of areas of this that need to be further explored, and that's what's been carried through into that final business case. So I will come across that I am talking to a paper that's about doing something that's quite innovative. It absolutely is quite innovative. It is something that if it comes off will be a first and a very, very significant step forward in terms of how we manage property. But I have a range of concerns, and those concerns will be addressed through this final stage. And I have to share those concerns, I have done, and we will have to then deal with them through the governance arrangements that are signed off. I can't give you a commitment as to what happens with the case. That's down to the Chief Constable and the two PCCs to decide what happens with that. The stage that's built in is it has to go through governance. The Chief Constable and the PCC will decide what that governance is that goes through.
Okay, so that's my question remains. Would it be possible for the panel to see it? That's really a question to you.
Eric, do you want to offer a view? No.
Fair to say, we've been fairly critical of the process, and we need to avoid the danger in any organisation of over-engineering complexity. And Warwickshire is very much the minor part of
Mm-hmm.
law. So there are no other partnerships in the county that are relevant. Panel's role is to scrutinise the actions of the Commissioner. The Commissioner was minded to take advice prior to action, then he can clearly make that decision. It may well be the final business case, some areas of commercial confidentiality which may require a closed session.
Okay.
I suggest, Chair, it might be as well if the Commissioner took note of the panel's view and we had further thought about it.
Okay. I think that's helpful. Councillor Fowler.
Thank you. A lot of it's pretty much what has been said already. It was like Richard, when I saw the 1.5 million, then excluding redundancy costs, that was exactly the thought that I had, that Richard had, because I looked at the previous page and we saw a saving of 3.7 million across the partnership. So obviously it's 1.5 plus redundancies. The other question was, I noticed on 2.5 I've seen a number of additional partners that is mentioned, and again, gets my head around this, Chair, although I heard the word minor part, the involvement of Warwickshire County Council in this, and yes, again, likewise, a view of the business case, and I also ringed round the future development, as in the dates of, and seeing what's gone on before, during April, but then you've got October through to December, and then on to April of next year. So the fear is, as I've known of certain things like this before, that certain things do happen, and I don't mean to say this mischievously, but things do go on behind the scenes, and before you know it, things have been approved and God knows what else before we've had the opportunity to put the input into it. So I do seek reassurance that we get that opportunity to look at it at the same time before any decisions are made.
Okay, well, the point has been made, and the Commissioner has stated that he will consider that. So thank you very much for that. I had two further questions. One was sort of just a bit more follow-up in detail about vested interests. The person who's been seconded as the JPV manager, does he have a vested interest in the outcome?
None whatsoever. So, Jim Stovey is my head of property.
Yeah.
Very clearly, he will not have a future role in the actual initiative itself.
He won't?
No, that's
okay.
The conversation that we've had, just because of his own future plans for direction. To come back to the point that was being made, the governance is not that. That's a project team. The governance is a stakeholder group that is made up of a range of chief officers, the chief fire officer, the chief executive from various of these borough councils, myself, etc., etc. The governance in terms of decision making and driving that project is coming from that group, not the project team. The project team is a project team. It's looking at all of those facets. It has drawn resources from every single partner that's there. I think there's 9 separate work streams. I look from people work streams, to asset work streams, to communication work streams, a whole range of work streams that are working on what it is that this thing will look like, so they can operate part of this.
Can I raise one other question, which is, I mean, this may be innovative in terms of the number of different types of organisations potentially coming together, but there are lots of big organisations who pool their property management and have companies delivering services for that property. For example, the Ministry of Justice manages all its various properties and courts and probation and prisons on a collective basis. And some of the experiences of large property portfolios being managed in that way, and large property services being managed in that way, is on paper it looks as if there are really good savings to be made, and there certainly are. But the quality of service is rubbish. You know, it costs sort of £300 and a week to get somebody to change a tap washer, for example. And that's a real example in terms of, you know, Ministry of Justice property management. So I think, you know, you need to be looking for assurances that not only the savings will be made, but the level of service at a local level, and in some of these cases, the local level for Warwickshire might be a police station in Atherstone, when the key focus of this group is Worcestershire, clearly. And you know, that's a worry in terms of service provision. So I'd like to see how that's taken into account in the outcome.
Okay, I think that one of the main differences between what you've just described is the Ministry of Justice property portfolio is managed by an external company that's not owned by the Ministry of Justice. It's a commercial arrangement. This is not a commercial arrangement in that sense. The owners of the company are the public sector bodies themselves.
But the company is providing services to the participants as a commercial venture, surely. It's a company that's operating in its own interest, is it not?
No, it's a company that's operating in the interest of its owners, and the owners are public sector bodies themselves. That's
Okay.
a very big difference, because it's a publicly owned company. It's not a private commercial contract arrangement, which is what happens with the Ministry of Justice. So there's a very specific difference, which is why be very careful that is allowable and being tackled through that TECL exemption. So we own the company in the context of that. Its direction, its fundamental basis under which it trades, etc., is set by the owners, and those owners are the public sector. That's a big difference between the two arrangements. I'm not arguing against you in terms of all of the fears that might come about as a result of doing it that way, but there is a very different starting point in that arrangement.
Yeah.
Second point is that I'm fundamentally coming from that perspective. For me, it's about what service the public get, it's about what service our staff get in their use of these assets. That's where we start from. I know what they get at the moment, I know where we are at the moment. We've done this in terms of bringing two departments together. We've done that in terms of what we know from a policing point of view, our services that we want it to look like, the standards that we want, etc., etc. And that's what we're taking into the discussions about how is this thing going to look and how is it going to deliver those sorts of services. So I can't tell you what the outcome is yet, because that's part of the discussions, but all of those fears and all of those aspirations that you set out are exactly what it is we're taking into this working arrangement.
Okay.
Can I ask that, Chair? Public sector is not a single entity. Within this, there are a range of coaches. Those coaches each have their own differential service expectation. And we need to be very, very clear what the public get from Warwickshire Police and our partners isn't diminished in one jot by any joint venture. I think that's what we're driving at, Chair.
Yeah.
That's sales owned. And I do think that cultural alignment will become absolutely critical if this is to ever work.
Yeah.
And Chair, if I could add, pretty much the same. It's the benefit to the public as well as the partners that, and it's quite right, this business case is important. So we understand it, and I'm sure my colleagues that are county councillors, if this is involving, I'm sure it does, involve Warwickshire County Council, we need to have a clear understanding of the effect that it would have for Warwickshire County Council, so we can relay back to our other members.
Nicola? Sorry.
There is no involvement of
Warwickshire County Council
in this initiative at all.
Right, that's what
the point. The point is that
we not provide any service for any police buildings at the moment.
so in terms of involvement in terms of JPB, there is none. The services that are provided by Warwickshire County are provided to Warwickshire Police. Warwickshire Police are involved in this initiative, and therefore the arrangement from Warwickshire Police to Warwickshire County Council remains as at this point on. What I was making is that in other geographical areas, Worcestershire County Council, Worcester City, etc., are all involved as a layer of capability. And that does, the arrangement goes forward, doesn't include anybody becoming involved to the extent of being a partner in the JPB. That's the point I was talking about, the extent to which other agencies want to be involved as partners to the JPB, therefore owners of the company, therefore contributing to the future direction of a state conversation in the way that this actually envisages. any other agency doesn't wish to, then Warwickshire Police will be Warwickshire Police in the geographical area of Warwickshire, and it will be dealing with the same partners it deals with today, in exactly the same arrangement that it deals with today, which is unilateral conversations in terms of delivering the services that currently take place.
Look, I'll just very quickly add that you've answered another question I asked some time ago, and that it doesn't involve county council. However, as we have elected members who are county councillors, we need to relay with clarity back to members, so to make them aware of what it does and does not involve. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Davis.
Appreciate I'm not going to describe that now. That is a very specific piece of work that needs to be invested in the Parliament. The exit strategy is a very clear piece of work in the Parliament, and there are lots of options that are currently being explored to do that.
Okay. Are we done on that? Sorry.
Warwickshire Police would not be a member, even though the two commissioners
Will be members. Is it?
less than the commission.
Okay. Yeah, it is. Okay, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing further in your answer to our question. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Work programme, item 5 on the agenda. Are we happy with the work programme that's been set out in this paper in the Appendix A? There's been a fair bit of work done on this, and thanks to Georgina for her work on it. Reviews the update and recommendations and actions previously requested by the panel. What have we got on that, Georgina?
Just a couple of outstanding issues at the moment. The increase in cycle collisions, which we've already discussed today. An officer of the council, Stephen Rumble, is tasked with getting some more detail on that. So hopefully I'll be able to report that to you by email in the near future. The budget working group will be scheduled for a date in August, and the planning and performance working group is due to have its first meeting on the 27th of August, and that's to consider the performance measures that it wants to monitor the Commissioner's office. And I think everything else is in Appendix B.
Are they completed? Okay, that's fine.
There's just one other item on the work programme that the panel needs to agree today. You'll recall at the last meeting that it selected 2 members to represent the panel at a conference event on the 10th of July, and unfortunately that was actually cancelled due to the industrial action and has been rescheduled for Friday the 17th of October. Now, the chair is still able to attend that meeting, but unfortunately Peter Fowler isn't. So it's to ask the panel if they'd like to select some of the members to represent it at that event.
Would anybody else like to come to that event on the 17th of October?
Can't we nominate somebody who's not here?
I'd like to, but I can't.
Okay.
You can't. Okay.
I'd love to, but I can't.
Well, can you circulate all the members, please? Thank you very much indeed. And do we note the update on the task and finish on the working groups? Okay. Thank you very much. Any urgent items? I did. Councillor Philip Morris-Jones did raise one issue with me that I said I would. It's not an urgent item, but I said I would allow him to raise under this item.
I think I did refer to the subject of complaints against the police. In the past, Warwickshire did not feature well. It was the smallest force in the country, but always appeared immovably in the top quartile of those receiving a large number of complaints. And we have the superintendent, his staff, and a committee dedicated to studying complaints. I'm just wondering whether we still got the same level of attention and treating with the same level of seriousness as we did in the past.
Can you give us a brief outline of how complaints against the police are dealt with and your involvement in that, or should we leave that to give us a report at a future meeting? Would that be? I'm more inclined to say let's have a report at a future meeting about how the complaints against the police system works.
Yeah, I would prefer to do that way. It could give you much more detail doing it that way.
And can you also give us some data then as well?
Absolutely.
On how many complaints there are and how they're resolved and so on.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Chair, just very quickly, so
Okay, thank you very much. Date of the next meeting is 26th of September in Alliston. Yes? And we presumably will have a pre-meeting at 9 a.m. as well. Okay, thank you. Item 8, report containing confidential or exempt information. We agree that resolution?
Are there any complaints that we need to be updated
Oh,
on?
right, okay.
And if so, we'll... No? No, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much, and that's the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well done, Rory.